Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. So I've noticed there's not a lot of Chaos Knight content out there. Obviously, there's 40k by Night who do an amazing podcast and heavily recommend you watch it. But in terms of visual content, there's not really much going on. So I'm home to upload my TTS games fairly regularly, ideally once or twice a week. Might be a bit slower, obviously, to begin with, as I get a grasp on the best way to do things, some of the systems and all that. Any suggestions, obviously, please let me know, as this is for you guys to watch and enjoy. So yeah, first game of this channel is going to be against Tyranids. I'll go more into my list in a bit, but I haven't had the opportunity to play Tyranids in a long time, so I was very much looking forward to this until I remember the whole Synapse thing, which basically renders our already abysmal army detachment rule fairly useless, more so than it already is. I've played about 3 games prior to this one before deciding I was going to start uploading. First was against the Nurgle Demon list, which is running their new to Christmas detachment, which annoyingly does Battleshock better than us. Second game was against Custodes, which was an absolute slog. Managed to squeeze a 1-point win against them. And third was against a very fun thematic all Harlequins army with their updated rules and detachment. Very unfortunate game for him. Havoc launchers would do most of the work the first couple of turns. There was little he could do. And when it came to things he could do, his rolls betrayed him, and so Bomber Turn 3 basically called it. Now on to the list for the game, and the list I've been running for those previous ones as well. I currently run 1 Stalker with Aura of Terror, 6 Carnivores, 4 Brigands, the Changeling, unit of 10 Blue Horrors, and a unit of 10 Plague Bearers. I used to run another Stalker and some Nurglings instead of the Siege Demons, but found this offers a lot more flexibility and options to score secondaries. And as I said before, haven't played against Nids in a while, so don't really remember much about them. All I primarily knew was that the Gene Sealers and Broodlord were a dangerous combo, as were the Neurotyranid and Zoanthropes, and that the Tyrannofex, or Tyrannofexes, I don't know if it's like sheep in that regard for the plural. Either way, not a fun unit to be shot by, and the Lictors with their Infiltrate, Loan Up, and Vice Versa makes them pretty dangerous melee threat, primarily to infantry, so shouldn't be too bad for myself. So just while you're looking at our deployments, when it comes to the ritual primary mission, it's one I've never played before. Don't know why. It's just never come up. And reading it genuinely made me feel like I was having a stroke. Unfortunately, I think that says much more about my intelligence than I care to admit. My opponent was also in a similar position where he's never actually played it either before. So as you go through the game, especially on my turn 3, an objective gets put down, and not entirely sure if that was legal placement or not, but I'll check later and sort of update as and when. And so, as you can see in the deployment, my opponent places Lictor below the middle objective, with myself then placing the blue horrors on the opposite side, and then his other Lictor being placed towards the upper middle. Quite a lot of infiltrate units being placed. Obviously, we were both kind of hoping for that first turn, in the hope we get a secondary we could easily score. Spoiler alert, he got that first turn, and my blue horrors were not long for this world. I play quite passive with my Chaos Knights, which I found works pretty great for me. I think for the most part, and obviously there are going to be some exceptions in some matchups, but running your War Dogs forward straight away, trying to take as much ground as possible, is pretty much just opening yourself up to being isolated and losing 2-3 War Dogs a turn, which I've seen before, which isn't obviously something you want to be doing. And you can see that with my deployment and the way I've set my War Dogs out. I much prefer taking it slow the first couple of turns, making sure to use the train to my advantage, picking up a couple of units with indirect from the Havoc launchers, as well as the solid shoot for the Brigands, and then using the remaining turns to clean up and use overwhelming force of toughness 10, 12 in bodies to my advantage. Something I do at the beginning of the game, before models have even placed down the board, is look at the key threats and opportunities. In this matchup, the key threat is pretty much just the Rupture Cannon that the Tyrannofex has. 2 shots hitting on 3s, on 2s if it hasn't moved because of heavy, Strength 16, AP -4, and D6 plus 6 damage each. The Exocrine also allows rerolls to hits of 1 for any model hit by its weapon, so he's using that combo a fair bit during this game. The key opportunities, however, for the low toughness and Wormwood Homogons, it was clear that these were going to be what he was going to do actions with, so I knew they had to be my primary target with the Havoc launchers, and then the Gene Stealers and Lictors for the other shooting profiles. Everything else was going to make me win on 5s. We both chose tactical secondaries, with my opponent starting off by drawing Marked for Death and Recover assets. He knew he wasn't going to get Marked for Death because of how I deployed, so he decided straight away to sack that one off, spend a CP and get a new one. Solid move as he ended up getting established locus. This is the movement out of my opponent's first turn. He moved the lictors forward to move block with the intention of making me use a CP for Knights of Shade, so I can get some of my War Dogs out from behind the terrain. He then had two of the Hormigaunt units move forward, one to establish an objective in No Man's Land for the primary mission, and then another to recover assets. He then also moved the Genie Stealers and Broodlord forward with the intention to charge and wipe out my Blue Horrors. The X-Queen at the top of his deployment moved, allowing his Tyranids to have a line of sight on my Brigand at the very top of my deployment, and finally his High Tyrant pushed up in order to make the most of his free CP offering. As you can see, his Gene Stealers did indeed wipe out my Blue Horrors. He got the final one with the very last attack with his Broodlord, which was fortunate for my opponent. With Blue Horrors, as long as the whole unit isn't destroyed, once a model is killed, you can roll a die, and on a 4+, you get to put down a Brimstone Horror in its place. His Terran effects did manage to get 2 shots off. I popped a 4+ invuln with Diabolic Bulwark beforehand, saved one, but failed the second, with it doing 8 damage to my Brigand. Just as I get into my turn 1, and you can see in my secondaries, I forgot to mention that my opponent had a unit of 6 Raveners in Deep Strike and added my Changeling. Onto the secondaries themselves, I drew Establish Locus and Cleanse. Being honest, both of those were going to be pretty unlikely for me to score, but the rest of the turn didn't actually end up going too badly considering that. Now, I took a bit of time here debating whether to use Knights of Shade and pushing some models forward, but ended up deciding not to. I saw what he had on the table and what was in front of me, and realised I could do probably some pretty serious damage without having to do much movement at all, and you can see that. And now this is what the board looked like end of my turn. The unit of 10 Hormigons doing recover assets was killed, which meant he didn't score anything for that, as it scored end of my turn. The other unit of 10 Hormigons was taken down to 4 models. I managed to do a fair amount of damage to the Gene Stealers, then managed to kill both the Lictors too. Overall, very successful shooting phase, managed to clear out a lot of his chaff as well as a lot of the Gene Stealers, which, if you're unaware, when paired with Broodlord, they put out a lot of dev wounds, which obviously caused quite a lot of damage. Didn't score any on secondaries quite clearly, so ended up discarding Cleanse at the end of my turn. So I'm just going to show you the board after my opponent has done his moves for the second turn. At the start of this turn, my opponent draws Sabotage and Behind Enemy Lines, 2 decent cards. However, because of how I've deployed my army, there's no way he can really put the Raveners, which is obviously handy to deny him those points. His strategy, quite clearly, is to try and keep my whole army blocked in for the most part, as he's aware I want to go out with everything, rather than just 1 or 2 War Dogs at a time. Because if I do go down that route, then he's going to be pretty confident he can take out 1 each with his Terran effect shooting. If he does manage that, then I've wasted a CP on Knights of Shade, and also lost 2 War Dogs in the process, which is obviously quite a good trade for him. His Hormigons try and deny one of my Carnivores at the bottom of my deployment, and Knights of Shade move deep into the midfield, and then the Gene Stealers at the top are there to deny a push into his other unit of Hormigons who are going to try and sabotage. His beaten down units of Hormigons are going to hide in the terrain at the centre, and I think they were on the objective as well. Nothing of note really happens for the rest of his turn. He fails his shooting, and he can't score behind enemy lines, and discards at the end of his turn, so that's that really for his turn. Beginning of my turn, I draw no prisoners, which I'm obviously very confident I can get, so that'll be an easy 5 VP for myself. Still lacking on primary though, as I'm yet to push out my own deployment. That's obviously going to change this turn, and from now on this way you'll see the pace pick up a bit. I've identified that after I finish my turn, he should ideally be all out of chaff, and only the Hive Tyrant and the main shooting threat should remain. End of my movement phase, and I've advanced my Plague Bearers up, which means I won't be able to score Establish Locus again. Most of the War Dogs at the top of my deployment zone have pushed out as well, so the 2 Carnivores close to the Gene Stealers and the Hormigons, and then the Bracketed Brigand ready to pop some shots into them too. I felt pretty confident with all the indirect and all the Chain Cannon and Demon Breast Spear attacks coming from the Brigands that I should be able to clear out pretty much everything, and worst case scenario, my Carnivores will be able to clear out whatever is left standing. I also kept my Stalker towards the back of my deployment, just in case he tries to drop the Raveners down. I know there's very little they could do, but it's just a good thing to keep in mind. If you can avoid letting that happen, then you'll find your games become a lot easier, only having to focus on your opponent coming from one direction. After my shooting, I made sure not to completely wipe out the Genie Stealers and the Hormigons that were sabotaging. I think that only the Broodlord remained, and only 2 or 3 Hormigons in that unit. The reason for this was because I wanted to charge my Carnivores to give me some extra movement forward. Looking back on this though, as I'm editing, I think I made a couple of mistakes here. First would be that I probably should have wiped out his Hormagaunts with shooting. This would have meant my Carnivore wouldn't have been able to be seen by either of the Tyrannofex models if he decides to move them next turn. I think this is down to me being sloppy and being overconfident that I could lose a few War Dogs and still seal the win. The second mistake as well was that I should have based into Broodlord. That would have allowed me to consolidate onto the objective in the centre. End of my turn, I end up scoring max on no prisoners, but decided to keep established locus, as I'd be very surprised if I'm not able to score that next turn. Beginning of turn 3, and it's now 27-15 to my opponent. He then goes on to draw no prisoners and containment, both of which should be doable. He's got Exocrines on the side, and should be able to take out some of my wounded War Dogs as well with the Tyrannofex. He starts off by using the -1 CP strat provided by the Hive Tyrant to revive some Hormagaunts, and then in the movement brings in the Raveners at the bottom of the board, as well as then moves his Exocrines, as I said, to perform containment. When it came to his shooting, his Tyrannofex that hadn't moved, so was sitting on 2s, was aiming into my Carnivore that was sitting in the terrain. As a result, I once again decided to pop Diabolic Bulwark, providing the 4+ invuln against range attacks. In his shooting, he ends up getting 1 lethal and then a natural wound with the other. If I end up failing both of these, I'm instantly dead, as that's a minimum of 12 wounds. Unfortunately, I do fail both, but command reroll bails me out, and I scrape a 4 with that one. Still does 8 wounds, but that means that I'll at least be able to get into combat with it on my next turn. Proper chuffed about that, until he started to draw a line of sight with his other Tyrannofex into the same Carnivore. He could see, but had moved so he was hitting on 3s, and because his Exocrines were performing actions, they weren't able to shoot my Carnivore beforehand, so he didn't get rerolls of 1. This ended up being incredibly unfortunate for my opponent, as he rolled a 1 and a 2, and with no CP either, he couldn't re-roll it. So that was it for the shooting phase, nothing in the charge phase, and then end of his turn, he scores 5 on containment and discards no prisoners for a CP. Beginning on my turn, I draw Sabotage, which should be fine. My opponent then does his Shadow in the Warp shenanigan thing. I insane Bravery the Carnivore that I need to use Knights of Shade in, so I can charge his Tyrannofex. And then it was about average on the rest of the Battle Shock tests, passing 4 out of the remaining 10. Okay, looking back on this, you'll see now, I don't know how neither of us noticed this, but that objective I put up is definitely not more than 6 inches away from my home objective. I think at this point the writing was on the wall really, so we were just going through the motions, getting into position for turn 4, which is likely to be the end of it. But either way, important note, always keep the details of the mission in your mind, and it helps you avoid silly mistakes like that. Anyway, at the end of the movement phase, I've pushed into a much more aggressive position, allowing charges for 2 of my Carnivores, my Plague Bearers, and my Stalker. I've also started performing actions with the Carnivore performing Sabotage and the Brigand creating said objective for the ritual mission. Nothing really of note in the shooting phase. I took out most of his Raveners, leaving 1 left, and killed a couple of the Zoanthropes, I believe. Honestly forgot they were there in the battle until now, but yeah, fairly decent chip and damage. So these are the results of the charges and fightbacks. All the charges went off, helps massively that Carnivores obviously have that built-in charge rerolls. Also, something that I haven't mentioned yet, the Stalker getting +1 to wound if the unit is firing at doesn't have a friendly unit within 6 inches is pretty good. But yeah, in terms of damage, I took out the remaining Ravener. I did 6 wounds to the Hive Tyrant, and that includes 2 wounds through the use of Tank Shock, and the other Carnivore did absolutely nothing to the Tyrannofex. At the moment, I'm finding I tend to roll a lot of 1s when using the Slaughter Claw, which isn't the best when you've already got 6 attacks, but that's just the way dice-based games go sometimes. I end the turn scoring established locus, and this is where I was fortunate. I had a very kind opponent. I mentioned earlier in my turn that I was going to deep shot my changeling, but ended up completely forgetting. Luckily, my opponent was more than fine me placing it down, quite literally in the only place I could in his deployment. When it comes to moments like this, or if you're playing someone, it's fine to hope they'll be kind and let you do something like that, but don't bank on it. He would be well within his rights to go, nah, unlucky mate, and that'd be that. Nothing I can do about it. I tend to go by, in terms of my personal kind of rules on that, as long as it doesn't affect models being removed off the table, or movement having to be readjusted, it's normally fine by me. A good example of this is, I hope it's a good example. Say you're playing against Grey Knights and you draw Mark for Death, your opponent selects their 3 units and you play out the turn, and at the end of your turn they bring up 3 units and realise that they want to bring one of the Mark for Death units up and want to pick a different unit instead to Mark for Death. That's going to be a sorry, unfortunately not. Otherwise I'd have probably played this round differently because of that, and it's way too late now. If you are in that position, you have to make the call based on the situation. Sometimes it's going to be a yeah, that's cool, no worries. But it's completely valid to say no, but just do so politely. If they do get arsy with you, if you're at a GT, call a ref over. If they keep going on, at the end of the day it's their fault and you're under no obligation to do so. My opponent ends up drawing Secure No Man's Land and Defend Stronghold. Pretty rough secondaries for him at this point. After his command phase, the score is 33-22 to my opponent, and they move straight to the movement phase. All he ends up doing really is falling the Hive Tyrant back, and then moving his Neuro Tyrant and Zoanthropes in front, just to make use of the anti-tank shooting, basically trying to hope that he can stop my Carnivores before they charge him. When it comes to his shooting, he makes the most of it. The Carnivore that was in engagement range of the Tyrannofex dies, as does the Carnivore that was wounded in the melee fight with the Hive Tyrant in the previous round. Fortunately, the losses end there, and he isn't able to score anything end of his turn. I star what ends up being the final turn for this game on 32 victory points to my opponent's 33, and I get some very good secondaries, assassination and recover assets, so that's potential for 11 VP end of this turn. In the movement phase, I move my Changeling into the terrain for some cover. I keep one of my Carnivores back in my deployment, and another one stays where they are in No Man's Land. All 3 of those perform the recover assets action, and then it was around this point when they realised I was going to score max on recover assets, and I was definitely going to get assassination, that, we agreed this would be the final turn, and that was even further confirmed as after I pushed everything forward, and the shooting took out all the Zoanthropes, and the charges by the Carnivore Stalker and Plague Bearers did more than enough to take out the Neuro Tyrant. I ended up with 11 VP as I scored max on that recover assets, and then we took down the rest of turn 5, and it would end up being something like 67-37 based on the secondaries we drew. So yeah, it's been my first video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Obviously there's going to be some teething issues with this as I find my flow, my style, and get better at editing and putting these together. So obviously please bear with me and we will get there. Any support you guys can offer would be incredibly appreciated. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. And share to any, Chaos Knight related Discord channels, Reddit communities, Facebook pages, etc. If this does start to get some traction, I'll invest in a better mic as well. I've been needing one for a while, but always could have some extra reasoning for it. If you guys have any suggestions for this channel, things you want to see, any particular matchups, my opinion on tier list, TTS breakdowns, list reviews, or even if you have a list you want me to try on the channel, there's a few that I want to try, so that'll probably come anyway. I do collect Chaos Knights as an actual army and have this list, so if you'd be interested in some in real life battle report kind of things, let me know and I'll see if I can get that sorted as well. But yeah, anyway, I think that's all from me today. Thanks for watching, take care and have a good one.